That's Stacey Blackwood. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is Strength and Conditioning. It is Wednesday, so Stacey, we're getting a lot closer to Alabama kicking off its season opener against Western Kentucky on Saturday. 8-5 team, pretty good last year. Obviously, had that 28-point comeback against Old Dominion in the bowl game to get to that 8th win. And what we're going to be doing today is previewing the game. Now, typically what we will do in some of the bigger games is we'll do like Alabama's offense versus opponent's defense. And then the next day we'll do Alabama's defense versus opponent's offense. We'll really dive into the weeds, the matchups, all that stuff. And we'll do that a little bit today. But just with it being Western Kentucky, next week being South Florida, we might do it for South Florida because obviously they played Alabama really close last year. Obviously that offense, even though Western Kentucky presents some challenges offensively as well, we might do one, some more extensive looks at South Florida next week. But for this week, we're just going to make it one preview video and we're going to kind of go over everything. So before we get started on that, and before we start talking Western Kentucky, I did want to get your take or your opinion on what Kalen DeBoer said as far as both the offensive line and the wide receivers. Because today he said he was fairly confident in using 5 to 7 wide receivers this week. And he also, when he was talking about the offensive line, he mentioned that he could easily see Alabama playing 6 offensive linemen throughout the game and rotating at one position, that position being right tackle. So what were kind of your reactions to both the comments about the wide receivers and the offensive line?
Well, I don't think it's really too surprising either way because of what we've been seeing happening throughout fall camp with the battle at right tackle between Formby and Pritchett. And then, you hear all these stories about how well all the receivers are performing in practice and in scrimmages. So I don't think it's too surprising that you're going to see 5 to 7 guys. I would be shocked if it was at the 7 mark, maybe not so much against Western Kentucky, but maybe further on down the road, you're playing 7 guys. Maybe you want to shrink that down to about 5 or 6. But I'm confident in all of those 5 to 7 receivers that he has confidence in because we've kind of seen what Kobe Prentice and Kendrick Law can do. You got to think they're going to be a year better, you progress this season, another year under their belt. But then the young players like, a Ryan Williams, a Cole Adams, maybe even a Caleb Odom. Maybe he's a part of that, 5 to 7 man rotation. I really want to see those young players and what they can do, most notably Ryan Williams. I'm sure all Tide fans are looking forward to seeing him on Saturday night. And as far as the offensive line goes, this is something we've even seen under Nick Saban, especially early on in the season, is trying to see it's different in practice and then when those lights turn on in a real game action, what that offensive line is going to look like. So not really surprising if you follow what's been going on at fall camp so far.
Yeah. Mick and I talked about this earlier. I probably, shared a lot of my opinions over there. There might be some crossover here, but, obviously you want it's encouraging news. You want it to be as deep as you can get it. And you don't want that to be through necessity. You want it to be because there's that many guys that are worth playing. And I think that's kind of where Alabama's at. Like, if they end up playing, it's like you said, the top 5 guys made sense. You said 5 to 7, and the top 5, that's what we've been hearing as far as guys who have been rotating with the first team offense throughout fall camp. Jeremy Bernard has been the constant. You've got Kobe Prentice, you've got Kendrick Law, the 2 returning guys who have experience. And then you've got the guys who we've also been hearing about with Ryan Williams and Cole Adams. So that's 5 guys. That's on the lower end of what he was talking about. But then when you throw in a 6th, the automatic assumption with that 6 would be Emmanuel Henderson. We've heard great things about him. He's been in Alabama system, hadn't gotten too many opportunities as far as on offense yet, but from what we've seen and heard, he's doing some good things. And then so that, you start to question, okay, who's that 7th guy? Is it Jaron Hamilton? Is it Rico Scott? I think a lot of people, the assumption would probably be Caleb Odom. And I've talked a lot about what he provides as far as kind of being that bigger bodied mismatch problem. And even if it's just against the Western Kentuckys and the USFs, and you have absolutely no plan to play him, on the road in Madison against Wisconsin or against Georgia at home, putting it on tape in those first couple of weeks, putting him on tape and you utilizing him gives Georgia and Wisconsin more to prepare for. And so I think that's really important, just putting that on tape. But I also think situationally, he can really help your football team because of that size element that he brings. That's not really, they get some of that size, the tight end position, but when you talk about the combination of size and athleticism, elite athleticism, no one else on this roster brings it like Caleb Odom does. So, I think that's really important. Do you want to add something to it?
Yeah, I just think about the red zone weapon that he could potentially be. That 6'5" frame, and like you mentioned, the ability to high point the football. We even saw a clip from one of the earlier scrimmages of him making the incredible catch. So I just think that there's a spot or a role for him somewhere on this team, and how early they involve him is going to be interesting to watch out. But like you mentioned, I suspect we'll see more in these first couple of weeks to, like you said, put on tape for down the road to kind of, let those defensive coordinators game plan for it at least.
Yeah, yeah, and exactly. But I wanted to get your take on that and just kind of see. It made sense with the offensive line as well. We knew that the right tackle battle was ongoing. Kalen DeBoer said it would probably carry into the first game, and it seems like that's exactly what's going to happen. And when you look at what how that's going to benefit really both guys when it comes to if Wilkin Formby ends up losing the job, any experience that he gets in a game like this will only help him down the line. If he's forced into action due to injury or poor play or whatever, if Elijah Pridgett ends up losing the job, I mean, I would say, despite the fact that he lost last year's left tackle battle to Caden Proctor, the reps that he got when they were kind of platooning a little bit or getting him some series or some action, I think that will only benefit him now and moving forward. So, I think that's really important to be establishing that kind of thing now. And it's not just in mop up duty where you're going in there, you're doing some run blocking stuff. With the receivers, same thing. It's nice to kind of expand your rotation and get guys, some situational looks, when the game is still in doubt, let them kind of run the off or be a part of the offense and how it's supposed to operate when the game is quote unquote in doubt. I think that's really big as far as building your depth. What are some things that you're looking for in this game on Saturday against Western Kentucky? I mean, obviously, like I said, 8-5 team. Their win total, I think over under, I think 7.5. They're not picked to win their conference, so that's Liberty, but they're, I think, projected to finish second. This is a pretty good, group of 5 team. What are you kind of looking for? Because Alabama is a 31.5 point favorite last time I checked. I don't know if it's necessarily, hey, I'm looking for them to win the game. Obviously, you do. That's the number one thing. But when you're going into a game like this, maybe a lot of people, it's just like, well, they're going to win. So, okay, what's next? What are you looking for?
Yeah, well, it's just there's so much unknown about this team, not only because the Nick Saban effect of him retiring and now Kalen DeBoer kind of ushering this new era of Alabama football, but defensively against this offense, of course, TJ Finley, the former LSU and Auburn quarterback, is the Hilltoppers quarterback. So to be kind of fun to see that guy play again. Alabama's got the best of him 2 different occasions, but they have some skill players. If you look down this roster, Western Kentucky's always been one of those group of 5 programs where they have some athletes. They have some dudes. You look at the draft each year, there's a Hilltopper being drafted almost annually. So they put some dudes in the NFL. They know how to find their type of players. They're going to throw the ball around. They're going to get the ball out wide to their playmakers. So I want to see how the defense reacts and what the defense looks like, because we're, for the most part, used to seeing a Nick Saban led defense that pretty much shuts these teams down early and often. So is it the same case under Kane Womack and this new defensive regime? That's really what has me most excited about the game. And obviously, from an offensive standpoint, what's the growth and maturation of Jalen Milroe? How has he improved? How is he taking in this new offense with Nick Sheridan and Kalen DeBoer? How does Ryan Williams fit in offensively in the game plan? How do they use Jam Miller and Justice Haynes? So just answering all these questions that we've kind of talked about all off season long, just kind of getting that early feel of what this team might look like.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Western Kentucky and kind of what they're going to bring to the table, like you said, TJ Finley, I mean, 6'7", 260-pound quarterback. I mean, he's absolutely massive. Kane Womack talked about him being just a big son of a gun, I think is what he called him, which he's correct. I mean, that's big defensive end, small, lean offensive tackle size. I mean, he's a very big guy, tough to bring down. The fact that he played at Auburn and played at LSU, he's played Alabama a couple of times, so it's not like he's unfamiliar with him. And he's not unfamiliar with Kane Womack because Texas State, where he was last year, played South Alabama. And so, as far as what Womack's going to want to do and some of his tendencies and stuff, it's not the first time that TJ Finley's seen it. You start talking about, some of these other skill position players. Elijah Young is one of their, running backs. They did get that guy from Elon that I think rushed for like close to 2,000 yards last year, Jalen Hampton. They got some receivers. Dalvin Smith was a big part of their offense last year. Their number one receiver was Malachi Corley, and he was drafted in the third round by the New York Jets. So you talk about those guys getting drafted. He's one of them. He's one of Aaron Rodgers, targets now. And granted, I think he's kind of had a little bit of a slow start. I mean, obviously, when you go from Conference USA to the NFL, that transition, I'm sure that's a pretty big jump. It probably is going to take him a little bit of time, but really talented dude. Had close to 1,000 yards last year, double-digit touchdowns if I'm not mistaken. But like I said, you got Dalvin Smith coming back. You got Keyshawn Johnson coming back. That guy's been a contributor. Easton Messer, as far as the slot, he was I think fourth as far as snaps played amongst the receivers, but he finished third on the team in a lot of the categories as far as targets, catches, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. He's going to be able to operate and do a lot of that underneath stuff that you look for. Their offensive line, when you look at it across the board, man, I mean, 6'6", 322, 6'3", 317, 6'5", 300, 6'3", 303, 6'6", 300. So they're all, it's a quality offensive line size. Got, I think, 4 starters back. It's kind of hard to get information sometimes on those smaller schools, but from everything that we know, 4 starters back, I think 91 total starts, if I calculated it correctly. So a pretty experienced bunch, pretty good bunch. It's going to present some challenges. They're going to go, a lot of 10 personnel. They're going to do some 11 stuff. You'll see a lot of different things thrown at you, that air raid offense, and they'll test you vertically, man. They want to get you running side to side a lot. They love spreading you out and getting you, not to the extent of Josh Heupel in Tennessee necessarily, but they like getting your big guys running east and west, and then they like attacking you vertically. And I think TJ Finley can, execute a lot of that. So, that's something to keep an eye on when you talk about what I'm looking for, in particular with the game, and from Alabama's side, it is kind of a lot of what you said, it's usage. One of the things that I brought up on the other show is against TSU, the season opener last year, Jalen Hill comes in, and as soon as he came into the game, while the game was still quote unquote in doubt, it was kind of surprising, I think, to people that he played as early as he did. Not only did they put him out there, but they started trying to get him targets early. And that was kind of foreshadowing as far as what they were trying to get him to be, or, how they were going to try to get him involved. Just a few weeks later, he's catching a huge touchdown against Ole Miss when it did really matter. And it was a major play to start that second half. So, you can look at some of these guys and their roles. And, sometimes if a guy's coming in early enough, or you see something specific that he's doing, if Caleb Odom's playing a few snaps and it's in, certain situations, it's in red zone opportunities. It's kind of, it really just, you can look at all the different scenarios and just kind of say, okay, they're using them this way in these situations. You can actually take a lot away from these types of games.
Yeah, and I want to touch real quick. You talked about some of the playmakers on the Western Kentucky offense. I think tight end River Helms is a pretty good player too. If you go back and watch some of their games from last year, he made some big plays for this offense. So it'd be interesting to see how they use him because, like you mentioned, they're going to be in a lot of different formations. So it's probably going to be based on how much they actually have him in the game. But I think when he's in the game, he's a player that the defense needs to watch out for. And you mentioned the usage thing. I'm glad you brought up Jalen Hill because I had forgotten until you just mentioned that how early they did put him in that game against MTSU last year, and it was a foreshadowing of what would come in a couple of weeks against Ole Miss, and that was a huge catch he made against Ole Miss. That was really kind of what turned the game for Alabama and kind of got Ole Miss off their back a little bit. But and it'll be interesting how they use some of these younger receivers. Are they going to do the same thing with a Ryan Williams or even a Cole Adams or a Caleb Odom? How do they use these young players like you mentioned? Because the number of weapons are there, but we're not sure what type of role they're going to have because we haven't seen it yet on the field. So, like you said, the usage is what's going to be interesting to see. And I know I talked about Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. Do they, in fact, try to bring in Richard Young as well? Do they try to use him in the backfield, to spell Miller and Justice Haynes? So, just the usage on offense is going to be interesting to watch out for. And also defensively for Alabama, I know we're kind of going back and forth on offense and defense, but the defensive line rotation, what is that going to look like? Because, there's 8 or 9 dudes that deserve to play, in just my opinion. So how do you think that's going to look?
Well, I love the fact that you brought up River Helms because that's a guy who's up near my neck of the woods. I'm from Athens, Alabama, and he played at West Limestone, so he's a North Alabama guy. He has certainly done some good things for the Hilltoppers. And as far as the defensive line, um, that's something when you talk about usage, you talk about rotations. That's one of the ones that you're going to be looking for. And for me, I know that Tim Keenan and Tim Smith and Jaheim Otis and Damon Payne, I know all those guys are going to be in that rotation. The one I'm most curious about as far as the defensive line is James Smith and how much action is he. Here's the thing. It's kind of like last year. You talked about Richard Young. I know we are bouncing back and forth, but there's a purpose behind it as far as what I'm saying. You were talking about Richard Young. It's, last year there was a 3-headed monster, technically 2-headed, I guess, but Jam Miller was also involved. You saw Justice Haynes in the season opener, but he didn't come in until the end of the game. And so knowing when Richard Young enters is very important. If it's in the second quarter, okay, that kind of tells us something a little bit differently, unless Alabama's like already up, 35-0 in the first half or something. If it's, a 2-touchdown game or even a 3-touchdown game in his first half and he's seeing some action, that matters. It's the same thing with James Smith on the defensive line. So I'm curious to see that. I'm curious to see, and we might not see everything that Womack has been talking about or things that we've heard because they might be saving it for some, opponents down the line. But, Womack was saying, hey, we might be try to get 2 Wolves on the field at the same time. Does that happen? What does that look like? Are they moving a bandit inside? Is it? It seems like that would be for an obvious passing situation. And if that ends up being the case, what are you doing with that bandit? I think LT Overton has been a little too good to not be playing him in those passing situations. If you are using 2 Wolves, and if he's not your starter, and so maybe he hadn't been out there. I mean, I think you need to be getting this guy as much work as possible. Are they getting the 2 Wolves on the field alongside LT Overton, and maybe he's playing inside a little bit? Maybe they're putting both the Wolves on the same side. What does that look like? I'm very curious. Second level is Justin Jefferson on the field at the same time as Jahad Campbell and Deontay Lawson. These are all things that you can kind of look at. And I know we're kind of asking or telling people what to look out for. What we're going to be doing is I know that I'm going to be doing it, and I'm sure you're going to be doing it as well. We'll be talking about it and reflecting on it next week. And if you aren't paying attention or you don't feel like paying attention, that's no problem because we're going to be covering it and we're going to be trying to figure out or decipher what some of this stuff means.
Yeah, because we talk about the new coaching staff and how we're trying to anticipate what they do, but there's a lot of new faces as well that are unproven. And that's what makes this year just so interesting and what this opening game means, because not only are we learning a new scheme, especially defensively and obviously offensively as well, but we're having to learn a lot of new faces and what these guys' role are actually going to be once the season gets going. So it's not just a case of, hey, we got a new coaching staff. It's there's a lot of new players. Talk about LT Overton, who has just blown up this fall. I mean, that's they are raving about him nonstop. And so, what does that mean for Jamarian Latham, a guy who's been at Alabama for what is this, his 5th year in Tuscaloosa? So, you know, while there is some familiar faces there, there's been some younger players or newer faces that have kind of made a name for themselves this fall, and we're just trying to figure out, and we won't know until the game gets here, of what the coaching staff has planned for these guys. So I guess that's what we're all looking forward to, is being able to sit down on Saturday night and finally see, who lines up between the 2 white lines and how that plays out. So that part has me really excited, because I know you're like me in this regard. You love to see personnel packages. You love to see, rotations and number of snaps and where people are lining up and, situational type stuff as well. So that's what has me fired up about Saturday night.
Yeah, one thing that we're gonna do, or I'm gonna do on a weekly basis is, I did it for Bama Online, and that's snap count observations. I go through and I look at, every snap that everybody played. I list that out for you. I always get those numbers from Pro Football Focus, and then I talk about what that means. And in a game like this, there are certain things that maybe you can't take away from just the number of snaps. Like when you look at the defensive lineman who plays, if Alabama wins by 30 plus points, then that's going to be expanded. And so, okay, Hunter Osborne got 4 snaps. What does that mean? Well, if it came at the end of the game, it means very little. It means he was playing mop up duty. We can maybe evaluate, how he looked on those 4 downs, but it doesn't really mean anything as far as the season outlook. So you can take probably more away from just looking at the snap counts against the Georgias and the Wisconsin, especially when you go on the road, because coaches, or at least Nick Saban, was really big on, he would condense those rotations and road situations because it's a much tougher environment. You trust the guys that you trust to be able to handle those environments. And so even like a Tyler Booker as a freshman, when they went on the road and played Texas in week 2, he didn't play at all. And he was pretty much part of the rotation, I want to say, in like every other game. But Texas in that week 2, he was a freshman. He'd only played in 1 game, played some snaps against MTSU. They weren't ready to trust him in those situations, so he didn't. But, at the same time, we'll be looking out and watching the game live, and obviously I'll be going back and watching it a lot more and getting a lot more information. We will be able to tell you, maybe a part of, Red Morgan snaps. Like, okay, I noticed he was out there starting, at the beginning of the second quarter. He played a lot. His snap count might be up because he might be one of those guys where he's playing with the first team when the game's still in doubt, but then they want to get him a lot of reps once they start pulling guys, and he's not technically the starter. So he ends up playing the most reps of really anybody at that position, or maybe anybody on the defense. Like, that's the type of guys you need to be looking out for. And that's what we'll be doing for you guys. You can find that at covercrimson.com. It's only $1 to sign up for a month. I'm telling you, that stuff can be very valuable to you. And just as far as, because we talked a lot about Jalen Hill at the beginning of last year, and just, hey, they're not just getting him in the game. They're making a concerted effort to get this guy the football. That means something. And so you could have been ahead of the game on that. And so, I think it's valuable. We'll be doing the game day threads too. That'll be a lot of fun, great conversation. But if you haven't already, go sign up at covercrimson.com. If you do the annual, you will get the shirt that Stacey's wearing right now. They'll send it to you. Phenomenal shirt. Probably the most comfortable shirt I own, to be quite honest. And now I'm treating it, I need to get a couple more, because now I'm terrified I'm going to get something on it or whatever. Like, I've worn it once, now I'm terrified to wear it again because I don't want anything to happen to it. But it's a great shirt. You're going to love it. But anyways, getting back to the conversation, Stacey, you kind of look at the other side of the football, Alabama's offense. We've talked a little bit about it. But, Western Kentucky, kind of a 3-3-5 defense, but they got that jack linebacker. So they get in and out of like 4-2-5 looks a lot. Coach Cap earlier was talking about just as many different things as they throw at you defensively. And he even said sometimes it don't even look right. And you think they shouldn't be doing this, but they'll do it anyways because it confuses you. And I think that Alabama's hopefully seeing some of that stuff and saying, okay, this is how we can take advantage when they do some of these things. But, they're going to throw a lot at this offensive line and a lot at this offense, a lot at Jalen Milroe. What do you think about, his progression and an ability to handle that?
Well, I think that's the biggest question really for the entire outlook of Alabama's season is where Milroe is at in this offense and how he's able to progress through his reads and read a defense, even pre-snap, which I think is a very overlooked aspect of that position, especially from Milroe's standpoint. But this Western Kentucky defense, the truth is it wasn't very good last year. I think like 90th overall in scoring defense, almost giving up 30 points a game. Was not very good against the run, almost 200 yards a game. I think 190 yards a game is what they gave up on the ground. So you're looking at a defense that wasn't very good last year. That doesn't mean they don't have a few guys that can make plays. They have a disrupted defensive lineman whose name is just escaping me right now, who's a really good player. I think I actually talked about him on Cover Crimson the other day when I was listing players from the state of Alabama. I can't remember if he was a part of that list or not, but but you can go to Cover Crimson and check that out for $1 a month. But no, I think they'll probably be improved under, I think Tyson Summers, the defensive coordinator, the former Georgia Southern head coach, is entering his third season there as the DC. And it usually takes a couple years to kind of get your scheme in a certain situation. So I imagine they're going to be a lot better than what they were last year. So it's a nice first game for Milrow and this offense to kind of get their feet wet in this new scheme and to see how much growth Milrow has actually had.
Yeah, and we've talked about quite a few times. These first couple of weeks are probably more challenges to your defense.
Mhm.
Western Kentucky is going to spread you out. They're going to throw the football around. They're going to go fast. They're going to throw a lot of different things at you offensively. We all know about USF and just now the name's escaping me of their head coach who came over from Tennessee. I'll think of it as soon as I stop thinking about it. Yes, there you go. When he's going to be a guy who does a lot of this kind of stuff too. And just I thought from what Alabama is going to be doing. Now, here's the good part about that. Alabama is, they're going to have a lot more talent than both of these first two teams. No one's going to deny that going in, period. But they've also been going against a very challenging offense all throughout fall camp, all throughout the summer when they were doing work, any kind of work back in the spring. Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, what they do, the number of different things they throw at you, the way that they can strain you in a lot of different ways. It's kind of what they're known for. So I don't think there's going to be anything that Western Kentucky throws at Alabama's defense. I don't think there's going to be anything that USF throws at Alabama's defense that's going to, create any sort of issues. But then the offense in week 3, I think that's where the challenges come into play because you're going on the road. It's going to be a hostile environment. That fan base is going to be fired up. And they're, a Big Ten defense. They're going to be pretty good defensively. We'll talk more about them here in a couple of weeks, but that's more of where you start to get into the big challenges for your offensive side of things. But at the same time, you're right. There's some kinks that need to be worked out. Anthony Johnson's a corner for Western Kentucky. He's a really good player. They got a guy in the nickel, Upton Stout. He was banged up last year, but that's a heck of a player. They got some good secondary members, and I think that they're going to end up being really aggressive because they understand they have to be aggressive against that's one thing that MTSU did last year. Now, that's kind of how they just play each and every week, but they were throwing the kitchen sink at Alabama defensively, and it was working. I mean, Alabama has they really struggled on offense for most of the year as far as consistency. But that kind of started with MTSU in week 1, and I think Western Kentucky they'll be doing a lot of that stuff too. So how does Milrow handle some of that? What is he at? Like one thing that we noticed kind of from the jump, even though he played well, especially from a stat line perspective against Middle Tennessee last year, there was one particular play. I don't remember the exact setup. I'd have to go back and watch, but I'm pretty sure they were bringing either a safety crashing off the edge or a nickel, and it was clear that he was blitzing. Milrow's got to see it, and he's either got to change his change the blocking, or he's got to change the play. Change the play, is what he needs to be doing. He's got to check out of it and go to something else because what you were asking JC Latham to do on that play was, impossible. Period.
Yep.
But he didn't see it, or he didn't know how to handle seeing it and how to adjust, and so he ran the play. That guy comes crashing off the edge, and he tackles. I want to say it was Jace McClellan for a loss. And now Alabama is in, I think, a second down and long situation. You're behind the sticks, and now, you're not playing winning football. So those are the kind of things that you want to see him handle more. I think he did get comfortable doing some of that stuff over the course of last year. So I would fully expect him to continue to have made progress and be able to do a lot of that. But that's something that from his standpoint, you want to look at. You want to see how he's handling some things pre-snap, post-snap. How often are they calling design quarterback runs? And maybe they want to keep that under wraps so they don't do it a ton this week or maybe in the first couple weeks, but that's something to watch. How often is he willing to take off and run? We know he wants to be a pocket passer. He views himself as a pocket passer. So when things break down around him, how often is he, willing to run? What does it look like? These are all things to monitor as well.
Yeah, and just kind of piggybacking off of that, when it comes to Milrow and what I want to see from Milrow is just make the play that's been given to you. Like if you've you caught a passing play and it's not there, you've had to scramble out of the pocket, and all you can get is 3 yards. Take the 3 yards.
or throw it away.
Or throw it away, but do whatever it takes so you're not getting behind the sticks. When you get behind the sticks, that just causes so many problems, and especially when you're breaking in a new right tackle. I think you feel good about everybody else along the offensive line, but when those defensive linemen and edge players can pin their ears back and get after you, it just makes your life more difficult on offense when you don't take what's in front of you and stay ahead of the sticks. So I want to see Milrow do that. I can't tell you how many times we saw him last year, take a sack when he's already scrambled out of the pocket, and all he's got to do is take off forward for a couple yard gain, and live to see the next down. Instead, he takes a needless sack. So if he can improve on that, that alone would correct a lot of the issues that plagued the inconsistency or led to the inconsistencies of the Alabama offense last year. So looking forward to that. Also, speaking of that offensive line, how well do they play in the run game? Do they blow these guys off the ball? Do we see a physical brand of football in terms of running the ball? Because last year that's all that was talked about in the preseason was kind of that bully ball mentality, and it just wasn't there. So I want to see if they can. I know it's Western Kentucky, and you can't you take it with a grain of salt, but this offensive line, I think it's important for them to come out and play well in this game, especially from an optic standpoint, not only to the fan base, to the rest of the country, because everybody remembers the sack numbers from last year and the inconsistencies of that offensive line.
The fact that it was so hyped going into last year,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
it ended up, and it was in hindsight, it shouldn't have been justified, but there were justifiable reasons why they struggled against MTSU. Everybody's like, oh, it's a much inferior opponent. How are they struggling so much to get anything going in the run game? Yada, yada, yada. And it's like, well, you got to understand that's kind of how MTSU operates. They take a lot of risk, and those risks, they pay off some and they can make you look bad, but they also, Alabama capitalized on a lot of those mistakes too. And you saw that in that game. But so that was more like understandable. But then you realize, okay, that was kind of foreshadowing for what was coming, and it was struggles all year on that front. And so, yeah, I agree with you that they definitely need to. This is a chance to because we're hyping up the offensive line again. I understand there's more question marks, I guess, but 4 of the spots seem to be locked up, and we feel really good about those guys. We all feel pretty good, really good about the 2 options at right tackle. Whoever ends up winning that job, people are expecting, especially in a Kalen DeBoer offense that can kind of help protect its offensive line a little bit with scheme. They're expecting this to be, there's a reason that the group last year for Washington won the Joe Moore Award. They were NFL. There was NFL talent all over the place. So it's not like that, it was completely by scheme, but they were also aided by scheme. It was talent and scheme combined created the best offensive line in the country. And if Alabama wants to achieve such a feat, they've got the talent, they've got the scheme, but they got to be able to execute. And so that'll be important to watch. And I think one thing, I said this about Milrow. I think I don't remember. I guess it was yesterday, maybe the day before. I think it was maybe the day before. But it created some confusion because I clipped it and probably I didn't elaborate on things enough. But it created some confusion on Instagram when I posted it. And it's that when I'm talking about Alabama being more successful on early downs, I understand that Jalen Milrow thrived in third and long situations. He lived in them last year. Alabama's offense would have been completely garbage if he didn't thrive in third and long situations. But there's 2 things. A, I was talking about the offensive line because even though Jalen Milrow made some big plays in those third and long situations, Auburn, at the end of the Iron Bowl, rushing 2 guys. Okay. That's a long, and that, I understand the down different, but my point is the offensive line had a lot of breakdowns in those situations, and Jalen Milrow helped mask some of those by extending the play and things like that. On top of that, it does not matter. Just because he thrived in that last year and he really struggled in third and short, which is like an area that Bryce Young really thrived in himself, that does not mean, oh, let's just, let's just knee the ball twice and put him in a third and long situation so he'll get it. That's not how things operate. You need to be putting your offense in favorable situations, and that's third and short because that opens up the entire playbook, and especially Kalen DeBoer's playbook. You're going to have success. Jalen Milroe does need to be better on third and shorts. He's got to be able to take advantage of the short to intermediate parts of the field where you're just trying to, move the sticks and get a fresh set of downs. I totally get that. I'm assuming going in that he's going to be much improved on that front. And if I didn't, then I would be approaching this a lot differently. But I did wanted to clear up kind of there was some confusion there. And because someone was like, hey, I mean, why are you saying that it's so important that they get in third and short situations when Jalen Milroe thrived in third and longs and struggled in third and shorts? That's not, you can't bank on that. I don't think
No.
that is sustainable, at all. So I just wanted to go ahead and clear that up too.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to consistently beat the elite teams in college football if you're always in third and long. I mean, I don't care how good Milroe is at it. You're not going to beat the elite teams in the country and get to where you want to be if you're in 3rd and 8 every single time you have the football. So, just more consistency, really, from on early downs from this offense, and it starts up front. It always does. It starts up front on the defensive line as well, and it's the same thing on offense when you have the football. Your offense is going to go as far as that offensive line carries you, along with how well your quarterback sees things pre-snap and post-snap. So, just consistency in both those areas was what I'm looking for. And it is game one. There's a long season ahead. There's going to be some ups and downs. I think you have to expect that with a new system. So, I do want fans to kind of be reminded that this is a new system. There's some new weapons around Jalen Milroe. So be patient, and I would say don't be overly optimistic if he goes out and throws for 5 touchdowns, but don't don't undersell because maybe he doesn't live up to your expectations for game one either.
Fantastic way to put that, man. I mean, that's exactly how it needs to be approached. And I mean, against MTSU, Jalen Milroe looked pretty darn good, and he
Yeah.
overcame some poor snaps, picked up a snap, and ran it in for a touchdown. And then the very next week, that's as bad as I ever saw Jalen Milroe look. I mean,
Yep.
just a couple of really, really, really bad interceptions. And then he kind of obviously, what happened against USF in week 3. And then from there, he just continued to get kind of better each and every week until the end of the season. But I mean, that's also kind of to be expected because you're playing the elite of the elite at that point. When you're playing
Right.
Georgia and Michigan's defense back to back. I mean, what do you expect Milroe to do? I mean, I understand guys like Bryce Young, the number 1 overall pick, was able to have a lot of success against a very elite Georgia defense, but those elite defenses versus Jalen Milroe's weaknesses and how they could exploit it last year, they could make life difficult on you. So, it's a patient game.
Yeah.
You need to not get too hot or too low on Saturday. Things might not look great, and I don't know. I don't know how Kalen DeBoer operates on this front. I've never went and watched all their blowout victories, but Nick Saban was big on tinkering in these types
Hmm.
of games. And whether he would admit it, he didn't want nobody approaching it like it was, anything other than the best thing, since sliced bread every single week. Didn't matter who you were playing, but you could tell he would
Yeah.
go deeper into his rotations early on in games, and B, you would see him tinkering with some things. Hey, if he was trying to maybe, hey, I want to get Elijah Pritchett some action at left guard. These are the types of games he'd do that. And so like it would be you'd see that tinker. I don't know if Kalen DeBoer's that way though. So we'll have to
Right.
wait and see. He might try some different things out because then if you can get guys, if you can get Elijah Pritchett some reps at left guard, if that's your plan, that's not happening at all. I'm just
Yeah.
using it as an example. But these are valuable times where you can kind of figure out in a live game situation, can he handle it? Can he do it? And B, it's valuable to get him those reps as far as him getting better at it. So I wouldn't be shocked if DeBoer does some things. So let's not overreact to everything and how it operates or how it goes. But because one thing, the example, and I meant to bring this up when I first brought this up, but it was like Bryce Young. I think he came in against Kentucky and he had like some magical moment. One of his
Yeah.
passes, if I'm not mistaken, down there in the red zone was just phenomenal. But he really struggled in that game. And it was because Nick Saban was tinkering. He was moving some different guys around. The protection in front of him, guys are playing new spots they haven't really played. He's like I said, he's tinkering. And Bryce Young was under constant duress in that game. And maybe he as a freshman playing in his first major action, he didn't look too great. And all the entire fan base took a lot from that and thought, man, I mean, I'm gonna pull for Paul Tyson in this quarterback battle because I saw Bryce come in at the end of that game when they were tinkering and nothing was right. and he didn't look like I wanted him to. So I'm gonna pull for Paul Tyson, and then Bryce ends up, going out there winning the starting job and winning the Heisman Trophy. And then, a year later, he goes #1 overall. So that's how it can happen, and so I understand. I'm guilty of it too, which is why I'm bringing this up. I have to tell myself or remind myself, hey, they're messing with some things. There's justifiable reasons for this or that. In my head, I always try to figure out, okay, what's going on here, and if I can come up with any justifiable reason other than just the worst case possible, I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. So I did that with Pete Golding a little too long, I guess. But
I was the same way. I was the same way.
so I mean, that can bite you, but that's just my approach, and I don't think there's any reason to get too down on guys too quickly. Like, what does that? How does that benefit anybody? So, anything else that you want to add to this before we hop out of here?
I don't think so. I think we covered as much as we could with all the wait and sees too.
Yeah, yeah, you're 100% right. And I mean, it's going to be fun, man.
Yeah.
Even though it's Western Kentucky, they got a fun offense. They're going to be kind of fun to watch and just see how they try to attack Alabama. Utah State a couple of years ago, they just conceded. I mean, that was bad. I mean, they knew they didn't really have a chance, and they didn't really try to throw a whole lot at Alabama. I think they pulled their quarterback pretty early, or maybe he didn't even play. I don't remember. But I mean, I just know that it was like, hey, we're here to collect a check, and that's all we're doing. But that's not going to be Western Kentucky. That wasn't MTSU last year, so it's going to be a fun game to watch. We're going to be covering it all right here on the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. A lot of content continuing to come out throughout the rest of this week leading up to the game, but certainly after the game, a lot of reaction stuff. If you haven't already, we appreciate the comments. We appreciate the likes on the video. Those are super important, and we appreciate every bit of that. But if you haven't already, please go subscribe to the YouTube channel, because that helps us as far as YouTube's algorithm. I'll continue to say this every time I bring this up. If people are watching our content and then they're subscribing, YouTube takes that as, okay, this must be pretty darn good content. They're watching it and they're subscribing. They want to see more. We need to put this in front of more people. So that helps us continue to kind of grow this thing that we're trying to do. And then also certainly go sign up at covercrimson.com. It's only $1. If you do the annual, you'll get that lovely t-shirt that Stacey's got on. That's fantastic. And we're also, Mick and I have been talking some of the stuff that we're going to be doing in Tuscaloosa. We might, for annual subscribers, or maybe it'll just be for subscribers. We're still trying to figure it out. Pretty much, if you have one of those shirts, might be like a key ticket to get some extra fun, have some fun with us. We're planning a lot of big things. So if you aren't already, definitely go sign up. It's only $1. And we appreciate everybody. Stacey, appreciate you, brother. And we will do this again soon.
Sounds good, buddy.